Welcome to our webinar. This may be the second start of this webinar, but the first one I started, and all of a sudden Facebook said I hadn't started it. So I'm starting it again. So here's the story. I'm Andy Simon. I'm a corporate anthropologist. I'm an author, a podcaster, and I work with organizations that need or want to change. Today's webinar is about a new book that I've launched, Rethink, Smashing the Myths of Women in Business. And that book came out of the work that my husband and I were doing at Washington University in St. Louis. So people ask me all the time, how did you decide how to write this book? It's my second book, and I was enjoying the whole journey. Here was a time that I wanted to share something important. The Simon Initiative was designed to help women entrepreneurs and men entrepreneurs, students, members of the St. Louis community, see, feel, and think in new ways, which is what we do. What we found was that many of the women were looking for role models. You may have heard me say this before, but Marian Edelman's quote, "If you can't see it, you can't be it," became sort of the mantra. How could I show women, aspiring women, what other women had done so they too could achieve the best that they could be? And so I went on my journey and I started to record the stories of women, 50 women. And I began to see some wonderful patterns. These women never heard "you can't." They didn't listen to the myths that said women don't do that. The mythology was that women and men had evolved differently, women to be in the home to care for the children and the kitchen, and the men to be out there to trade, to harvest, to travel, to fight for them. And their roles had evolved in such a way as that women were going to be in the home and the men not. And then all of a sudden things began to change. Were we evolving, or was culture enabling us to? But somehow the mythology was up for discussion, if not destruction. And so here became some very interesting times for us. As I watched these women, and they were of all ages, from all backgrounds, I began to hear some wonderful stories. So one June, I'm heading to Nantucket with my husband, and I'm telling him about these stories. And he says to me, "My gosh, these are about women who are smashing the myths of what women can do in business." And I went, that's a much better book. So I went back and I rewrote the book. Now, Greenleaf Book Group is our publishers, and I had a wonderful editor there, and she and I got excited about telling this story in a different way. And so when you ask me, how do you write a book? It's very much a journey. What is it you want to say? What's the stories you want to share? And I'm honored that these 10 women allowed me to share their stories, and I share my own. Now let's talk about stories. Why is story so important? The essence of who you are is in that story. What we've learned is that your brain takes all the data and it begins to create a story. That story becomes your illusion of reality. It is who you are, it's what you do, it's what matters. And then what happens is that story limits what you can see and who can see it with you. And now you have a fixed story. Now you have to open up to possibilities. And what happens is you have to change the story. And the mythology around it that was supporting the old story, perhaps, about what women and men do, about what you can do. And so each of the women were telling me their story, but also showing the way for others to understand how they could change their story. What did we find? Let me give you 3 women to talk about, because there are 10 in there and my own story, but I think it's interesting to think about those women as illustrations of the rest and of yourself. Women don't lead. Really? I mean, you can think about Angela Merkel today, or Kim Ang, who got that wonderful job as the general manager of the Miami Marlins. But what is it about women that they don't lead? They're not decisive. They take too long to decide. They're too conversive about something. And when they make a decision, sometimes they think more about it afterwards. What is it about women? But the research tells us otherwise. In fact, some wonderful research says that women, in fact, are better managers than the guys. Of course, nobody necessarily believes that, but it sounds like there's something going on where women are doing things that people said you can't. And so here's Jamie Candy. Now, Jamie, I happen to know quite well. She became CEO of my husband's company, and she was able to take it to its next level. The company became the 5th largest in its category, and then she sold it. and went back to Edmentum, a company she had worked with before, and became its CEO and has grown it very dramatically, has a big vision for how to help students, and it's in the educational business as well. What does Jamie do differently? As you read her story, you'll hear her tell you it isn't about command and control. Instead, it's a great deal about empowerment, collaboration, but also listening from the outside in. We both believe that you need to understand who you're serving and what they need in order for you and your staff to create the right solutions. And she talks a lot about having 3 things to focus on. So everybody is focused and they are accountable. And she also wanders around, so she knows really a lot about what's going on inside. But as you read her story, you say, in her role modeling, there's a process that we can do as well, and how interesting it would be if I mimicked her. The second woman is Andy Kramer. I just love Andy Kramer's story. She starts out by telling how in elementary school, she went to a court as part of a school trip. And she watched the dynamics and came back and told her parents she was going to be a lawyer. And they said, "Oh, man, you better talk to our friend who's a lawyer." And the friend said, "They don't like lady lawyers." So what does Andy do? Becomes a great one. Gets into a great big practice, but not without a lot of curves along the way. And she'll tell you her story about the situation with a partner in a firm she was interning in that didn't go so well, about learning about the dynamics of men and women, about the biases. And now she's working to help women understand that it's not them, it's the workplace. And how do we change the workplace to address all of the gender biases? Great story to share. The third woman is Stephanie Breidloff. Now, Stephanie is an entrepreneur par excellence, but she also had worked in a major company beforehand. And then she had 2 boys. And as she was trying to raise them, she realized there was a problem. Paying the nanny taxes was complicated. So she began to develop an idea with her husband about how they could have a company helping other families manage their nanny taxes. Interesting. Because what she came up with was an idea, no venture capital. You know, the VCs only spend about 3% of their investments in women businesses. But here she and her husband began to grow it. And when they told their families that they were going to leave their corporate jobs and just do this, next thing they found, the families all said, "Don't, no, not a good thing to do." So they said, "Of course we can." Now, what's interesting is that they did it without any venture capital. They did it out of their own cash flow, and they created a wonderful company called Breidloff and Associates that they sold to Care.com for a lot of money. As you read her story, listen to how she did it, how she matched up the culture inside with the culture of those she was serving, how she became the expert in a field. Because it isn't simply having a product to sell, it's seeing the need and aligning your organization with the people you're serving. Is there a theme here? How do we align? So you'll read about Maria Gallo, a university president, or you'll read about Celeste Ford, who really has made it in the aerospace industry, or Evelyn Medvin, who's really a star in geosciences, and women should go into geosciences. And I write my own story in there. It's a story about how anthropologists went into business and began to bring the methodology, theory, and tools into an environment where people said, "Oh, you don't go." And then at the end, I began to realize that women everywhere might want to rethink the journey that they're on. What could I do to help? What did we learn through this whole journey that could be helpful to somebody else? So I put together a how-to, and now I'm developing that into an online program. And I'm doing coaching for 10 women to help them help me develop a program for you. So as you're listening to this webinar, think about, what is it that I'm doing? How am I doing it? Am I doing it right? Do I want to be unstuck and unstalled? Some of these women are very successful, but they're not happy. So is it time for you to rethink your own life's journey? And if it is, can we help you? Can we help you find the pathway? Can reading the book, Rethink, Smashing the Myths of Women in Business, help you really become the person that you want to be? So we're having a book launch party. It's going to be on January 6th at 7 p.m. I would love for you to come and join us because it'll be such fun. Now, you can find this on your on my website. Go to andysimon.com and there's a registration place right there. We are going to bring together some of the women from the book, and you'll find them telling you their stories. And then we're going to have Maxine Clark, who wrote the foreword to the book, talk about her own journey and what she's doing now to help women. And then you're going to hear from Edie Fraser, a genius of a woman who's formed the Women's Business Collaborative, and how we're collaborating now in order to give women the opportunities that they need. And these are successful women and companies coming together to see how we can really create that pipeline to move women into the right positions and get some equity, positions, and parity in the business world. But I do think what you're going to find is that this is a time for change. It's very much a time to empower women to become the best that they can be. Can I help you become the best that you want to be? Because if you can see it, you can believe it, and then you can do it. So people ask me for the tips. So I usually focus on 5. The first tip is, if you are seeing something that isn't right, change it. Take action. It's a see, believe, and do. If you see it, don't be a bystander. Be an active participant in change. The second thing is, if the rules are controlling you, change the rules. Who else but you can change them? The third is collaborate with another woman. I like the word collaboration because it means that we come together as equals to help each other. And as we collaborate, we also communicate. So this is a time to tell the story, your own story. In fact, send us the story. Send it to info at andysimon.com, and I'll begin to share those stories as well. You're on a journey. We all are. And what we're really here to do is change the world. So you can pre-order Rethink at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, even your local booksellers. Porchlight has it in bulk for you. People are buying 20 and 30 and giving them as Christmas presents. I can only tell you it's a time of sharing. And I want you to share your story with us so we too can tell how women are really becoming the best they can be and helping others do the same. So I'm open for questions and chat if you'd like to, because I'm really delighted to hear what you would like to do. So any ideas that are coming through would be great. One idea that always comes through is, are these women unique? Yes and no. People say, are they like me? Yes and no. There's not a single woman who had exactly the same parents. And they each will tell you about the parents they had and how they really gave them some gift, whether it's education or knowledge about the real estate market or some way of doing things. But they all have different backgrounds. What about a spouse or a partner? Do you need to know much about that? Well, they each have different ones. And some don't have any partners. But those who do will tell you that it's a collaborative effort. The word collaboration comes up often. And nobody can do it completely on their own. So they have friends, they have a community. As you begin to change, you're going to see that those around you are going to be changing as well. And so part of what you have to do is begin to think about, how do I share what I'm doing with others so they can help me? Ask them. Ask them if they can come back to you with some ideas about the 1 or 2 things you can add to your repertoire of tools and how to do it. The third thing that I often hear as this book comes out is, are we empowering women to really hurdle? How do we do that? You know, this is in the story that you believe. So the piece I'd like you to do is imagine a different future. Collaborate with your mind. Empower yourself. Begin to visualize how you would like the world to be with you in it in a different way. There's wonderful research. If you collaborate with your mind and change your story, you begin to believe the new story. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. So imagine yourself empowered to take charge of what it is you'd like to do, whether it's to run a division, become a leader in, help other women for, find more women who want to get into the pipeline and move up that you can coach. Whatever it is, if you imagine it, you can begin to believe it and then act on it. Now, the brain only likes the familiar. So whatever you're doing, find others who can help you make the unfamiliar familiar. And I say that very carefully because the brain will hijack all of the efforts you have to change, and it won't like it at all, even when it's the right thing to do. So I'm Andy Simon. I'm a corporate anthropologist, an author, and a podcaster. I like to share stories. Come help me share your story. Send it to info@andysimon.com and let's go on a journey together to rethink women, smash the myths, and let us all become the best that we can be. It's been such fun sharing with you. Please have a wonderful day and a safe journey. Bye-bye now.